Today is Thursday, June 25th, 2015, and we are here today to interview Sister Maureen McGarrigle.
Correct.
Our first question is, we would like to know about your journey of faith. What led you to the religious life?
Well, isn't that interesting? Because Tuesday, they had a surprise retirement party for me, and I told the whole story. If I could just. Well, I think the first thing that led me to religious life was my mother had a sister who was a daughter of charity, and my father had two sisters who were sisters of St. Anne de Beaupré. So from the time I was, grew up, religious life was an option. It was, I knew sisters, I knew they were ordinary people, they had two legs and all those other things that other people do. They didn't, weren't born with a habit on. And of course I went to Catholic school and had the sisters there. So it was just an option. That's the first part. And then when I got into high school, I was going to Mercy High School in Detroit at that time. And there were two of my girlfriends that I met there, and they were both named Joy. And one was a convert to Catholicism when she was about 10, and the other one was a Baptist. And so in my deep ponderings, I decided that if Joy the Baptist would become a Catholic, I would become a sister. This was my bargain with God. Well, Joy the Baptist never became a Catholic. But I guess that's what really put it in my head, and then in prayer and thinking it through, and in having the staff at the high school and knowing so many sisters, it was kind of like a normal choice. It was not something way out or outlandish or something. My mother and father, I don't know about my dad. My mother wasn't real happy, but she would never put anything in my way. The only thing was when I told her, she said, "You're not going till you graduate from high school." And I said, "Oh yeah, I had planned on doing that." So that was not a problem. And really, I was just convinced that's what God wanted me to do. And the Adrian Dominicans had taught me that if you want to be happy, you need to do what God wants you to do. That's the way you'll be happy, because God has your best interests at heart. So I can remember sitting on the porch step of my girlfriend saying, "Anybody want a religious vocation? I'd be glad to give mine to anybody who wants it." Nobody took it, so I entered, and my thoughts were as I entered in was, well, I'm going to give this my best try, and if it's meant to be, they'll keep me, and if it's not meant to be, they'll send me home. So that's what I did, and here I am 57 years later.
Congratulations.
So they kept me.
They kept you.
And the other part of my story was when I was my second year as a novice. We were just in the process. We had just asked to make our first vows. You go to the Mother Provincial and you ask to be accepted by the community and to make your first vows. And we hadn't heard back yet whether we'd been accepted, because they have to take it to council and vote and all that. And so anyway, my best girlfriend from second grade, who had entered with me, and two others were sent home. They were not allowed to make vows. And I don't know how I processed that, but I do remember going to bed that night, and I had a dream. And in the dream, I was home, sitting on the end of my bed, looking out the windows at the corner of Grove and Lindsay, crying my eyes out because I had been sent home. And when I woke up and realized I was still in the convent, I didn't know which was real, the dream or that I was. So that's when I knew that I really wanted to be a Sister of Mercy. And that dream has been a big support through the years.
Now, why did you ever consider another order, or how did you become
How did I
a
choose
sister?
Mercy? Well, probably the Adrian Dominicans, I know now, but the Adrian Dominicans whom I had in grade school, I decided I didn't want to be one of them because they yelled all the time. I now know that was because they were teaching elementary school as opposed to high school. And the Sisters of Mercy, were strong women, and I liked them all, and so on. The only other order I considered was the Home Visitors of Mary, which is was founded in Detroit in 1949. by Monsignor Ryan with the blessing of Cardinal Mooney. There were 2 orders founded that same year. They have their mother house right near the cathedral. I was interested in them because they were local. A lot of it was local. I think part of it was the fact the mother house was here in Detroit. I really didn't want to move away. Little did I know. But anyway, I wanted to enter. I think part of it, of that, came from my mother's sister, who was a daughter of charity, never saw her father after she entered because she was always too far away and he couldn't make the trip. And so I know that was one of the reasons I think my mother was so slow about saying me, was she just thought I would be sent someplace and, you know, it would be really difficult ever to have contact and so on. So that was, I think, you know, big, deep theological reason. And how on alert to the signs I was, for better. As a part of our senior year at Mercy High School, we put on 2 senior plays, and one of them was The Barretts of Wimple Street, and the other one was Mercy Unto Thousands, which was the life of Catherine Macaulay. And when I entered the community, I was dumbfounded to find out we were founded in Ireland. Now, I mean, I was in the senior play, we did the life of Catherine Macaulay, and it didn't dawn on me that the Sisters of Mercy were founded in Ireland. Somehow didn't get through. But that was incidental to the situation.
What was your focus as a student? You went to Mercy College?
Yes, I went.
Okay, what was your focus then as a student there?
Obedience. Yeah, I mean, when you entered the convent, you were told what you were going to take. Well, your first year, your first year was just the general curriculum, right. And, you know, so you had your English and you had your history. But we started with, of course, the theology and philosophy. And then your second year, which was your canonical novice, which is very limited in what the church prescribes. That's your time to really investigate your willingness to put your life into religious life. So there's a lot of theology and a lot of philosophy and some psychology. So then your third year, which was really your sophomore year, because it was the first 2 were just your first year plus. And in the middle of that year, you received from the Mother Provincial what your majors and minors were going to be. And I can remember that I took a math class the first semester with another sister. And we never knew who was keeping who company, because you couldn't have 2 novices, 1 novice by herself. It always had to be 2 novices. So I didn't know whether I was keeping her company or she was keeping me company. And in January, we got our majors, and I was to be in secondary education as a math major and with a science and French minor. And so those became my focuses to do that. And the other sister that took the math class, she went on to become a nurse.
Okay.
And then we made vows at the end of that year, and then you finished your last, normally your next 2 years were your junior and senior year in college. So it was, the normal thing was for a sister who didn't have any college education to take 5 years to graduate. But I took 6 because I was in secondary education. And at that point, and I don't know how long it lasted, but a decision was made in the education department, because Mercy College was known not only for its nursing, it was also known for its education, the training of teachers. And they decided that for secondary education teachers, they needed to spend a full day in the classroom like they were teachers. So when you did your student teaching, I had to complete, and because I was a math major and a science minor, all my courses were 2-semester courses. There were no 1-semester courses. So I had to finish all my college credits before I could do my student teaching. So I had that extra semester. I was finished, by Christmas of '62, but I didn't graduate and didn't go through the ceremony until June of '63.
So where did you teach after that?
Okay, you got a map of Michigan?
Here it is.
My first year, well, I did my student teaching at Our Lady of Mercy High School, the one in Detroit that was on the campus of Mercy College. So the first semester, I was the student teacher. The second semester, I was the teacher.
Okay.
So I ended up teaching my first year. Then I was sent to Mount Mercy in Grand Rapids, where I was there for 2 years. And then I made my final vows, and I went to teach 7th and 8th grade, well, 7th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in Cadillac, St. Anne's in Cadillac. Then I went the next year to Ludington, where I taught in the high school. It's a small school, so I taught Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, Physics, Biology, Religion, and Choir. And then, this is not unusual. So then it was, I got a letter from the University of Notre Dame saying that because they had a National Science Foundation grant, that they would be willing to give me to get my master's degree in mathematics if I was interested. Because whatever monies they got, if they could support 2 sisters on whatever the money they got, because they didn't have to pay, the expenses of a teacher who had a family.
Oh. Okay.
So that next year I went off to Notre Dame and got my master's degree in mathematics. I had already started it in summer school. And then the next year I went to Bay City, where I taught in one high school for 3 years and in another high school for another 3 years. And then I went to Kalamazoo, taught at a high school there for 4 years. Then I was provincial secretary for 3 years. Then I went back to school to learn some computers and taught at Mercy High School for the next 7 years. And that was the end of my teaching career.
And approximately what year was that?
1990 was the last year I taught. Yeah, I was
1990.
provincial secretary 80 to 83. And then 83 I went back to school to Mercy College to get some computer knowledge, none of which is at all relevant now. I was programming in 4 languages and, none of which is the least bit relevant. The only thing that's relevant is I know what a computer can do. And all the stories I got from my teachers. But then I needed to care for my parents, and so I couldn't teach because I was being called out of the classroom, and you can't walk away from kids, And so I've got a job at Macaulay Center here in the business office and in activities, and I was here for 7 years, 90 to 97. And then I got a position as Director of Religious Education in Parish in Troy, was there for 5 years. And then I decided to take a sabbatical. This would have been 2002, and discovered they needed staff at Mercy International Center in Dublin, the original mother house. So I took a position there in Heritage for 2 years, and that's where I became an archivist. And so then after I came home from there, for the last 10 years, I've been the archivist here. So like most sisters, I've had a variety of. But what's interesting is every single ministry prepared me for the next ministry. I mean, if I hadn't been a math teacher, with mathematics, you have to be organized. You can't, and you do a lot of logic, and that kind. So what I developed as a math teacher, as a side, it was organizational skills, and so I brought those to being provincial secretary. And then when I was provincial secretary, you had to type, and we had a correcting selectric. Oh, that was so wonderful, correcting selectric.
Yes, it was.
And in fact, we got the first word processor, where that's all it was a word processor. And we had so by the time I left there, I could type very, very well. So when I took my computer classes, a lot of things were easier than for other students because I knew the keyboard, because you had to key, you had to do a lot. So that skill helped me do so many things much more easily than other students. And so then, and all along I've been teaching religious education, and I had a very good example in the one at Our Lady of Sorrows. So when I took the job as religious ed coordinator, I just did what she did. and my organizational skills, because if you're the director, you plan the whole year and you give your teachers, very organized kind of thing. So again, organizational skills, and the same thing as an archivist. That's the first thing I did when I went to Dublin, was completely reorganize the archives office, because nobody had done it. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it wasn't done. So.
Had you ever taken any archive courses?
No, I hadn't. Luckily, my job in Dublin was primarily artifacts, things. And basically it was, you have to take care of the things in the house. Well, the house itself was an artifact, but it was the things inside. So I was getting paintings cleaned, and I went around and nothing was cataloged. So, I had to catalog everything on the computer. And there was another big thing, getting the names of all the sisters in the world, Sisters of Mercy, and that was another organizational kind of thing. And then when I cleaned out all the files, there was all kinds of lists and little paragraphs and snippets of history. And so I learned, my learning curve was, like this, and I just learned so much. And I could share it with the other sisters. Something would come up, and then, like someone was just mentioning, all the interviews, you're seeing pieces of the same puzzle from a variety.
Right.
Well, when the sisters from Ireland would come and visit and talk, I get this story and this story, and then, you
They're
could
all
put
fit
things.
together.
Yes, all those little tidbits of information were never put next to one another, and so my biggest contribution was the tour of the house. For the tour guide was 3 pages long when I got there. When I left, it was 14 pages long. I had found that many I had stories for practically every item in the house that I'd picked up somewhere. And as far as I know, none of them are legends.
Well, I think I want to kind of bring you back to Mercy College.
Okay.
Did you have a role there at the college?
Well, obviously, my first role was as student. And then after I had finished my degree in mathematics, I graduated from that in the summer of '67. It was kind of like, what do I do with my summers now? You go to summer school. So I don't even remember whether I was asked or whether I volunteered or whether I was commandeered or what was the case. But they asked me to participate in this new program that summer of '68, probably, or '9, where the college had made a decision. I think this is one of its biggest important decision that it made. It said a whole lot about the philosophy of the school. There was a strong emphasis in society. It's a little chipmunk feeding out there. But anyway, a strong emphasis in society to get education, quality education, to the marginalized peoples. But very often, their elementary school education wasn't up to snuff.
Right.
And then they get into secondary, and it was less up to snuff. And so they would go to, you could give them all the free tuition and all that kind of thing, but they just weren't ready. They couldn't do the college level work because they just didn't have the foundation. So the college instituted a program where people took tests and that kind of thing. But if they were felt that they had the potential, then they were allowed to take these courses that were specifically designed to help fill in the gaps in the education they had so far, so that when they did start college courses, they would be able to be successful. We didn't want them, because there were 2 alternatives. Either you did that, or you lessened the quality of the college courses so that they could pass.
You didn't want to do that.
And there were some colleges that did that. They lowered their standards so that these people would be able, be able to succeed. And but the Mercy College of Detroit made the decision not to do that. So they did everything they could to help these people get the people that needed it and were tested that way. And so I taught that class a couple summers, and I actually taught one semester while I was teaching at Mercy High School. I also came to the college and taught one of those classes. So they were usually in the evening. They were usually mostly adults who were coming back to college. But there were some, 18 and 19-year-olds. So it was, and my job basically was to say, that you're older now than you were when you were in first grade, so your math readiness is much better than it was when you were in first grade. So we can do this, get them over their fear, or the math teachers most hated. I never was good in math, so I don't expect Johnny or Jeannie to be good in math either. I go, but anyway.
Do you have a favorite story or fond memory of your time there with a student or other faculty?
Well, because I was in summer school and because I was teaching the classes that I was teaching, my class, I'm trying to remember. If I remember my classes, I seem to remember teaching more over in Manning Hall than I did in the main administration building, but I could be wrong. I can't say really, because it was summer school and there wasn't a lot of out of class time. Most of the people came, they arrived just as class started, and they left as soon as class, because they had families to go back home to, and
Right.
they weren't living on campus, and so you didn't have that kind of after school kind of thing. So I wish I know there are a couple stories, but I can't pull them up, because I remember them coming up, adults came up, and whatever the case was, in some cases it was, things were beginning to become clearer, I don't remember any negative experiences.
What impact do you feel you had on the students?
Well, my aim was to give them a sense that they could do it. That if they couldn't do it, I would have, if I didn't think they could do it, if I thought they were, out of, not in a place where they needed to be in order to grow, I would tell them, because I think you don't push people in a direction that's going to mean failure for them. But it would be very, very few. The only ones there were some cases where it took a while for the students to appreciate what they were getting, not because they were getting, but what I mean is that some were bored. They didn't see why they had to be there, that kind of thing. So you needed to kind of symbolically slap them up the side of the head, in the sense of get real about yourself and about this is not a judgment on you as a person. That's the other thing, the fact that you weren't prepared properly is not a judgment on you as doesn't mean you're a bad person, doesn't mean you didn't try, it doesn't mean any negative things about you at all. It simply says you weren't exposed to the kind of education you needed in order to learn. There may have been other issues, but that's not a necessity, that's not what we're addressing here.
How did they react to that?
Mostly positive.
Mostly positive.
Yeah. No, I mean, as a teacher, you build, you don't tear down. And part of building is to make people understand what they can do. I mean, that was true in high school too. I mean, there were some students that were taking 4 years of math, should not have been taking 4 years of math. They were way in over their heads. But mom and dad wanted them to be a doctor, or mom and dad wanted them to be this, and I had a lot of conversations with mom and dad, but these people that were older, they were their mom.
Right. Kind of changing a little bit. You might have told us this, but how has your ministry changed, especially over the years, especially as a Sister of Mercy?
Well, the biggest change, of course, is that I'm not given my ministry, is that I get to choose my ministry. on one hand, it was much easier when every August you got a slip of paper that told you what you're going to do the next year. On one hand, and you weren't used to going out and looking for a job, so to speak. I was extremely blessed in that I really had never had any. Well, I shouldn't say that. When I left Macaulay Center because my job disappeared, although I would have had to leave anyway. But anyway, my job disappeared. I thought, what do I do now? So I got out the Catholic directory and found all the and wrote letters to umpty-nine parishes and our hospitals, and saying, okay, this is my educational background, these are my skills, is there any position you have open that could use this? And I only heard one parish wrote and told me that no, they had no opening, but thank you very much. I interviewed for St. Joe's in Pontiac to be a patient advocate, but I realized that I was a patient advocate for my parents, and that I really didn't need a job that made me a patient advocate. So I decided that wasn't where I needed to go, and I didn't know where I was going to be ministering the next year, but the chaplain here at Macaulay, somehow I heard that he was living in the housekeeper's house at the parish, one of the parishes in Troy, which I had never heard of. And I thought, well, Troy isn't too far, because I had to move to Rochester, Michigan. So Troy isn't that far from Rochester. So I called them on the phone, and I got the pastor and told him, and he said, Sister, you're an answer to prayer. Our religious education director just walked out the door, moving to Wisconsin the day before.
Oh, wow.
So there I went for 5 years. I thought, I know I can do this. Well, and I loved the job. I really did. But I loved working with catechists. In fact, when I went to Ireland, when I took my sabbatical that turned out to be a 2-year position at Dublin, I thought when I go back to Michigan, I will become a teacher of catechists. That's what I would like to do. But while I was there, as I'm coming home, literally, as I'm coming home on the plane, I'm thinking about the future. And they had asked me to be archivist twice before, and I had refused. And so as I'm coming home thinking, oh, Maureen, you know so much, and you've learned so much. It just seems a shame not to be doing something that uses that knowledge. Mm-hmm. So when I came home, I told them I would be willing to be archivist. So here I am.
So what did you enjoy so much about teaching the catechism?
Well, first of all, it was just being in the presence of their faith. You know, if you don't volunteer, they're all volunteers. Most of them were mothers or fathers, not all of them, but they valued the religious education of the children so much so they were ready to put their body where their mouth was, and they were so thirsty, whatever you gave them, they were just so eager, they were just, of course, a variety of personalities and all that kind of thing, but and they were so appreciative. I always had to chuckle because the woman that was before me was much younger than myself, and she was only there 2 or 3 years, I think. She moved because her husband was a medical student and he was getting his internship, so she went with him. But I guess everybody loved her. She was a lovely lady, but she was scattered. She was just, she was just very scattered. And of course, they about dropped dead when they came in the first day, and I had an outline for every class, for every for the whole year, and what would be taught, and all this kind of thing, and when a whole calendar of events and when they would happen. I mean, I had the whole year planned out, and because the biggest thing I had when I was doing religious education was, if you're teaching class now, it's helpful to know what I'm going to be teaching next week and the week after, because there may be something today's that can, be something that you can again refer to later on or point to. So I made sure that when they got their lesson plan, that at the bottom was, this is what you'll be teaching next week, and this is what you'll be teaching the week after. And then it was always, this is a lesson plan. Every class is different. You may need to adapt this. You know, just don't get too far behind. Or if you do get too far, let me know and we'll see what we can do. Because otherwise, they could spend the whole year on the first lesson, which wouldn't be real helpful. So, but that was, they said later that, you know, it was just the contrast was so, I didn't know, but the contrast was so different. And then I'm a trained teacher too, so that helps.
This wasn't part of our initial interview, but given the recent death of Sister Kenise, we're wondering if you have a fond memory of her or a favorite story you'd like to share.
Well, I can't say I've known Kenise. Her blood sister, Bridget. Was a friend of, was in a group of girls from Mercy High School, you know, and those particular girls, a couple of them had boyfriends from the University of Detroit, and those boyfriends and their gang included my brother.
Uh-huh.
So I had known the names. I heard the names. I had never met them, but I knew the names. And when the day I came to enter, Sister Bridget was there to greet my family because she knew my brother. And so it was kind of like there was at least somebody who knew my family, even though I didn't know her. I knew she knew my brother and so on. So that was, and then I found out that Kenise was her sister, who was a few years older. And but then I never lived with her, never saw her, because she had already finished college by the time I entered. I just knew her by sight, and I knew she was, that she had a lovely singing voice. And but the thing I remember is when she did of her many roles, I used to say to her, Kenise, you get prettier and younger every year I see you. She did. She just seemed. She didn't seem. You'd see her, she looked the same now as she did 10 years ago. She just didn't age at all.
She had almost no gray hair.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it I would say in the last, of course, the cancer had something to do with it. She went through the first bout and then the second bout. But I don't know whether it was the sparkle in her eye or the impishness or whatever. But she was. I can remember also when she was working, she was a facilitator for meetings. She worked for an organization that did that. It was a Catholic organization that helped to facilitate chapters and assemblies and all that kind of stuff. And I remember thinking, I'd like to do that. I'd like to do that. But I thought, well, that'd be nice to do something like that. I never did. Well, I did once. I don't know whether it was a disaster or not, but anyway. Anyway, but that's my. They're kind of far off memories.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're also curious. Do you happen to have a favorite story or fond memory of Sister Agnes Mary Mansour?
Well, she was kind of again. I knew who she was because she
Okay.
was on the faculty when I was there. Then, but while she was president of the college, of course, I was outstate teaching, so I
Okay,
didn't
so
run across her that much. My contact with her was I typed up her letter of resignation from the Sisters of Mercy.
Oh, wow.
I was provincial secretary at the time.
Wow, that must have been difficult.
And I was, we'd gone through, all the turmoil, and it was just a really hard time. And she was told to, the team, the provincial team, and Agnes Mary were to meet with this bishop, cardinal, I forget whether he was a cardinal or not, a bishop, who was bringing to her the decision of Rome. And but they had, none of them had any idea that it was an ultimatum. And so she was given 30 minutes to decide whether to leave the Sisters of Mercy or to leave her position as Director of Social Services for the state of Michigan. And so she didn't have anything prepared. So she wrote her letter of resignation, and then I typed it up for her, and that was a really hard time. And she did it with all the grace in the world. And the other thing I didn't keep that much touch with her, but the thing that happened was after she left the Department of Social Services, I don't think anybody will ever know how much grief she got, not just from people outside, but people at Lansing too, in giving her a hard time. Because, as one of the people who respected her said, the poor have never had such a strong advocate in the Department of Social Services. I mean, she went in and she told the legislators the truth, and what she thought about some of the laws and rules and regulations, and how these actually affected people, and she just became extremely, and she was a political, I mean, there are some people who are political animals, and she was a political animal. I don't mean that in a derogatory manner. It's just she understood politics, she understood how it went, she felt it was an effective tool for social justice, and that's why she wanted to participate.
Do you know if what she told the legislators had any change in their...
I think it touched the heart of, at least touched the heart of some of them.
What about the laws? Did it change any of the laws?
I don't know that well enough.
Yeah.
But
As long
anyway,
as it changed some of them.
that's a whole issue. We
Right.
could spend a lot of time talking. But I think, I don't know if it's helpful or not, but because of the circumstances of the whole situation, she kind of made herself distinct from the community after she left. Not that there was no animosity or anything like that. One of the miracles for me about that whole thing is not every sister agreed with her or agreed with her decision. They thought, I'm sure there were a lot of our sisters who thought she should step down or should never have accepted it in the first place. But not a word of that was ever said publicly. It didn't get it. Any newspaper would have just grabbed at being able to quote some sister in opposition. None of them. The whole Detroit province just, gathered the stockades or whatever the expression is and circled the wagons, and many letters of many opinions came to the provincials. I know I've archived them all. The tons of letters that Agnes got for and against, I've archived them all. So I feel like, in some ways I know the story, even though it wasn't an integral part of it. But in the mind of the Sisters of Mercy Province of Detroit and in the Institute, she never left. I don't know if you know, but part of the thing was that she could not re-enter the community.
Could not even re-enter?
No, she couldn't re-enter.
After she stepped down?
After she stepped down, she could not re-enter. Well, I forget how many years later, 10 years later, something like that, a letter came from Rome to her saying that was withdrawn. If she wanted to re-enter the community, she could.
Oh.
And so the question was asked, and it was asked, and my remembrance of it is something to the effect, do you want to put yourself through this again? So I think she decided not to. She became an associate. She is buried with our sisters. She died here at Macaulay Center. So as far as we're concerned, she never was not a Sister of Mercy. Even though, officially, she was not a Sister of Mercy.
Do you have any recollection of Sister Emily George?
Well, again, I certainly knew who she was. You couldn't
Right,
miss her,
kind of.
being so tall and witty, very witty, and saw the ludicrousness of things. very brilliant. And I know, she was so young when she became president, and then she was so young when she became our first became provincial in '71. And she was, we had another whole situation somewhat similar to Agnes Mary, but it wasn't with the church, it was internal to the community, with a large group of sisters withdrew while she was provincial, which was a very, very difficult situation. But what she's known for is one of our favorite pictures of her is doing the hula at one of the chapters.
Okay.
And if you think she would look, but that's the way she was. She was so self-conscious. It was never about Emily. Emily was always, her mind could, do but as far as pretension or I'm the president or I'm the provincial, none of that. None of that. She was always just fun to be with, and that's people telling stories about her. And I remember when she died so suddenly. Some of our sisters there were a couple that were just absolutely devastated. There was an open casket, and they had but they had a veil over her face, a piece of gauze over her face. Evidently from the automobile crash, there was quite a bit of damage, because she was killed in a head-on collision on a snowy road.
Oh, wow.
As she was returning to the University of Notre Dame, where she was scholar in residence, or whatever that title is. And she was, I think, 48 or 49, so she
Very
was
young, too. Well, our last question is there anything we haven't asked you, or we haven't discussed, that you would like us to know?
Well, I don't know if you know it or not, but I said that I thought that decision about educating, filling in the gaps so that people would be ready was a significant move on the part of the college. The other, because it showed a dedication to those who, especially Catherine McCauley, our founders, would be interested, the people on the margins, the people marginalized because they just weren't given the opportunities other people were, and we were trying to give those opportunities. But in conjunction with that, and I think coming out of the same philosophy, this property that we're on right now was purchased in 1959 as a site for Mercy College of Detroit, what became Mercy College of Detroit. Plan A was that Mercy College would move out here because it had to expand. It was land bound, and so it needed more room, and so they bought this land thinking that they would move the college out here. Well, then became, and I don't know the ins or outs of the discussion, or who even instigated it, but there was some discussion about, okay, who are we as a college? Who do we serve? How can we best serve them? And so on. And so it was decided that we would best serve the city of Detroit by leaving Mercy College where it was and leaving it a day college as opposed to a campus college. And so then when that decision was made, it was decided then to move everybody else that was there out here. So the high school came out here, the provincial house came out here, the novitiate came out here, and the rest is history. But and so that way the college took over the high school building, and Manning Hall was already there, and so was the dormitory. So and the Middleton, what's it called, the student center. But I think that was another significant decision that was made in light of what are we about and what's the purpose of the college. And the purpose of the college was to serve the people of metropolitan Detroit.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Do you remember the name of that program? Did it have a specific name?
I I can't tell you off the top of my head. I really don't know. I haven't read this, well, I'm sure I read it. I haven't read this second book, 1966 to 1990. It may very well be something in this second volume of Sister Mary Justin Sabrin's. You just missed her by a couple of years, you know. She lived to be 100.
Oh, I did not
Wow.
know that.
Yes.
I'm still at 1962. I haven't heard the end of the story yet.
Yeah. I'm sure you interviewed Sister Linda Worthman.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we
Because she would have much more knowledge of the last 20 years of the Mercy College's life, you know, than almost anybody else.
She was able to roll us into not only Mercy College, but roll us into the University of Detroit Mercy.
That's right.
She was both.
And it says you miss Sister Gretchen, Mary Gretchen, because she would have been able to help you too, because she was provincial during all of that.
Oh, yes. She was on the Board of Trustees at UDM.
Oh, yeah, I'm
For a
sure,
while,
yeah.
yes.
Sister Ellen Marie was on the best Board of Trustees for a number of years, and she just came back she's here now in Michigan. She's living with Sister Linda Marie. Ellen Marie Byrne, she's been on that board for, I don't know if she still is, but I know she was.
Anything else?
And she would know Emily George, because Emily George was really her mentor.
Oh.
So, and she would know Agnes Mary. Of course, Linda probably knows Agnes Mary the best. But
I don't know if we were asking that question at the time.
We'll have to go
As-
back and look at the interviews.
As
don't know.
things roll on and we're hearing these, we're adding, you know, we added about Sister Kenise and we knew that was going to happen, that
Mhm.
as the questions have actually kind of morphed as we've moved on.
yeah.
Well, we thank you very much.
You're welcome.